Deadline day chaos, but hey, let's hope North Melbourne is big enough for a couple of helmets.
Corner he goes. It bounces in the vicinity of Carey. Magnificent! And that is really the goal of the season.
All right, welcome back to Further North, everybody. Now, this is a bit of a chaotic episode. Got an interview with a massive Swans fan called Donnie coming up in a second. We did record it a few days ago, ready for the Luke Parker trade because he is in the USA and we can only do it at certain times. But we've had trade deadline day as well, and there's so much going on, so much to talk about. So we're going to get to the Donnie interview. We're not going to talk about Luke Parker too much here by myself. We're going to save that for then. We already know what's gone down. We've got Caleb Daniel, we've got Jacob Konstanty. There's so much stuff going on. So let's try and just have a quick look back at what we have done today. So let's just talk about the emotions straight up, right? I was so nervous that we weren't going to do anything. I would have thought that a player like Luke Parker, who's requested a trade to North Melbourne, would be a fairly simple deal to get done. Now, I know there's haggling over picks and all that sort of stuff, but look, it's a little bit tight for me. I spent the last hour, I finished at 8 o'clock. I'm recording this at 8:54 currently. I finished work at 11 hours. I was nervous. We've got the deals over the line. I've come straight around podcasting for you guys. So look, I'm putting a shift right now. But surely we can get it done a little bit early, Brady. Please. I can't go through that anymore. I've had to watch basically no wins for 5 years. We as fans don't need this stress, sir. Get it done earlier and let us have a good night's sleep. Now I've got to stay up late podcasting and I'm going to be tired for work tomorrow. Anyway, let's talk about the deals. Luke Parker and Jacob Konstanty are official for pick 44. I think this is a really good deal. Obviously, I would have given up more for Luke Parker personally. I know that's maybe overs, but the importance to our own club, I think it doesn't really matter. But to get Jacob Konstanty, I know he was a free agent anyway, and there was other ways to do it, but just making all this come together. Pick 44 for two players. Konstanty is that small forward. We'll talk about him in a second and a few stats. But Luke Parker is the one that we needed to get over the line for our club's future and our progression. And we've done that. So fantastic job. Pick 44. Not much to give up in the grand scheme of things of what we're getting for Luke Parker. I know he's 31. People whinge on age a little bit too much for my mind. The leadership, the toughness in the midfield, the ability to play in the forward line. There's so many positives about this move for North Melbourne. Myself and Marnie are planning to do a big trade recap on everything on Sunday. So we'll try and do that for you then. But this is going to be a little mini preview just to react, just a live reaction. The other one is Caleb Daniel. Now, this was a 50-50. This was one that I personally didn't feel like this was going to get done at all. But we've got him for pick 25. Now, is that overs? Once again, I kind of think yes to other clubs, but I think for us in the position we've been in for the last 5 years, I don't think so. Pick 25 for Caleb Daniel, a guy who's a really, really good ball user off halfback, can push McKercher up to the wing potentially and give us a little bit more drive off halfback and a little bit more composure maybe than a Zach Fisher or Darcy Tucker or someone like that gives us. So I like that deal as a whole. Caleb Daniel's a player. People talk about him being small, but he does have a helmet. So I think it's a massive, massive tick. No, smaller guy. He's just got reps on the ball. He's only 28 years old. Apparently, we've offered him a 4-year deal, which I think is fine. It's calmness and composure off the back line. So I really, really, really like this deal. We're at a point at the North Melbourne Football Club where we don't need to we can pay overs like pick 25, what everyone else would have thought is overs anyway. And it's still worth it to us. And I think that's the thing we've got to get in our heads. Like, I don't know if I'm just crazy here, but you know, Luke Parker to us is worth way more than he would be to Collingwood or something like that with where we're at as a club. And this is the way we move forward. People have been screaming for years, we need leadership, we need leadership. We just got 3 premiership players coming into our football club. One's 28, one's 31, one's 32. I don't think any of them are completely past it. You know, I think these are really, really good deals. This is an A+ off season for me, as in trades. We'll get to the draft another time. So let's talk about Caleb Daniel. Didn't play heaps of games last year. The Dogs, I don't know, what did he play, 16 games? The Dogs he sort of fell out of favour, but from what I can tell talking to Dogs fans, not really because it was a lack of ability. It's more about him maybe with Beveridge and Beveridge preferring like a Garcia or someone like that instead of him. But he's still got plenty to offer. I mean, he's played so many games over his career. Obviously, he's a premiership player and he's a proven commodity. And these are things that we don't have many proven commodities in our team. We've got potential. And we've got players that, I guess, look, Simpkin, LDU, proven to a degree, but we need more of them to create consistency around the ground. There's too many holes in this team. We've just filled 3 holes in this team. So I really like the Daniel deal. Look, like I said, I'm going to get my head around it more. I'm going to look into it a little bit more, where he might play, where exactly he'll fit in. This is all off the cuff. This is just live reaction to all this stuff going down under an hour ago. So really, really, really excited about that. I wouldn't pay too much attention to his season last year. That was more him and a Beveridge thing than him not being a good enough player. Only 28 years old, in his prime. You know, he's going to be a North Melbourne player for the next 4+ years. And I think that's completely fine. Really, really excited about that. And once again, a proven player that just means we get better. Draft picks are great if they work out. If they don't work out, then we've wasted something. We know this guy is going to come in and be good. And I think that's the most important thing for a side in North Melbourne where I think under 22 years old, we are elite. Probably the best in the comp, to be honest. But these players raise our floor to let those young players shine and make us into a finals team. So that's how I'm viewing that one. The other deal then, we're not going to talk about Luke Parker much because, like I said, the interview with Donnie is about to start. Let's just talk about Jacob Konstanty really, really quickly. Hasn't played a game for the Swans. His highlights sort of do suggest he's got a really good, like a good overhead mark, really good overhead mark. Looking at some of his VFL stats here, he does sort of fit the mold of what we're looking for. As far as I know, he was a first-round pick, I'm pretty sure. Pick number 20. So yeah, basically a first round pick in the 22 draft. He is a Victorian boy as well. So that is really good in this day and age of players wanting to be babies and go home. So look, looking at some of the VFL numbers, he's had a game. He's had an 11 tackle game. He's had a 7 tackle game, consistently 3s and 4s, 5s, sort of across the board in tackles. And yeah, goal threat. I mean, he had a 4-goal game, a 3-goal game, a bunch of 2-goal games. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's worth a punt. He was never going to get into that Sydney team. Adding him onto a deal like this, I think, is completely fine. And the void of small forwards at North Melbourne, I think it's absolutely worth a shot. Him, Geordie Payne and Robert Hansen Jr. can fight it out to try and get that small forward role. Anyone else, I don't think is really going to make it personally. But hey, it's a player that we absolutely need or a position, that we absolutely need to fill. We've got another young guy basically for free to come in and see what he can do. So I don't think there's any issue with that at all. So a massive, massive tick for Konstanty. Once again, unknown, might be nothing. I don't know. But throwing him into the Parker deal, I mean, if Parker got done just for 44 alone, I think that is still a really, really good deal. But Konstanty being thrown in there as well with the void of small forwards we got, tick for me. So massive ticks across the board. Daniel, welcome to North Melbourne. 2 helmets in one club. We have to do a Caleb, Daniel and Tristan Jerry tribute game next year where we all wear the helmets. I think that'd be absolutely fantastic. So, look, welcome to North Melbourne, boys. I really think this, the floor has been raised dramatically at North Melbourne. I think this is an A+ off-season. I don't think for a club that's struggling at the bottom of the ladder, I don't think we can get better than the leadership and toughness of Luke Parker. The experience of Jack Darling and Caleb Daniel, who's only 28 years old, played in premierships, and just what you're getting, and you're getting a really solid player to fill another need. So, look, I'm stoked. Let's talk about Luke Parker because that's really the big one. So we're going to throw to the Donnie interview right now, and then myself and Marnie should be back on the weekend to but we're going to do a wrap of the trade period for us. So get her thoughts on it and all that sort of stuff as well. We'll be back. But here's Donnie and myself. It's a great chat. We talk about Parker and what he can offer. Donnie is so knowledgeable. For a gentleman who lives in the USA, he probably knows more about the AFL than I do, to be fair. So it's a great interview. Listen all the way through. We do get into a bit of father-son and chat and a little bit of a heated debate, to be honest. We had a disagreement at the end, and that's very, very exciting. But we're good friends. Love you, Donnie. All right, throwing to that now. Thank you so much, guys. More trade wraps coming later in the week, but just thought I'd get this out as a quick reaction. So let's go North. God, I'm genuinely stoked. Okay, Donnie interview. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Bye-bye. So welcome back to the Further North podcast, everybody. Now, I've sent Marnie on a mission this week. Luke Parker's incoming to North Melbourne. I said, Marnie, we need the biggest Swans fan you could find. And by God, she went and did it. We've got Donnie here, who is, even just from the brief chat we've had before this podcast, I've never known a more passionate Swans fan in my entire life. Also does a podcast as well. So, Donnie, hello. Thank you for joining me. Let us know a little bit about yourself and your credentials as a Swans fan.
Well, thank you, Josh. It's great to be on the Further North podcast. I have known Marnie for a while. She's actually been on my podcast. My podcast is the Donnie's Disposal podcast. I am an American I'm psycho. I must be psycho because I enjoy Australian rules football. I cover and interview players, coaches. I also cover the AFL, AFLW, in the state leagues, VFL, Sample, and Waffle. Yes, I'm up at crazy hours of my weekends watching this fun, exciting, exhilarating sport, and I am a avid, crazy Sydney Swans supporter who gets up at 4 a.m, 2 a.m, midnight, and 9 in the p.m. to watch my beloved Swans, both the men's and the women's. I love my women's footy just as much as I love the men's. I've been doing the podcast now for almost 3 years now, and I've had the pleasure of talking with AFLW players, Sample W, VFL, Waffle, and Waffle W players as well. It's just been an incredible ride. I may not be the biggest podcast, but I'm one of those that I thoroughly enjoy the sport, and I love throwing any support behind any of these footy players because the sport is absolutely outstanding.
That's interesting. So, why the Swans, and how long ago did you get on board to AFL? How did you find it? How did you find the Swans, and how long ago we talking?
Well, when I was a kid, there was this. I've told this story so many times. I'm surprised. I should just really record it and just play it on repeat. When I was a kid, about 8 years old, my father is an absolute sports nut. Like, he watched any sport he could, whether it was in the States, whether it was in Europe, or whether it was in Australia. And we had the sports channel called Fox Sports World, which kind of helped my father with his sports loving, and he saw footy and absolutely was just enthralled by this different sport, the sport that took almost this amalgamation of many of the sports that we're used to over here in the States, and it made this uniquely crazy, outstandingly different sport where things that we thought were really cool, like the fact that you could jump on somebody's back to try to catch the ball, that instead of passing the ball with their hands, they're kicking it to each other. So it was just incredible, fun sport. Unfortunately, when I started getting into my later days in secondary education, the channel unfortunately folded. So I lost footy there for a while. But in 2009, there's a league up here called the USAFL. And conveniently, there was an Australian and a couple of Americans who picked it up in LA who started a team called the Des Moines Roosters. And I started playing in 2009. Unfortunately, if those that know me know that I am not a small person. I have a little bit of husk to me. I'm just not.
Stewie Dew did as well, mate, and he had a great career.
Well, I wasn't the worst, but I wasn't the greatest either. Yeah. And I fell in love with the sport, and I decided to retire due to a little bit of a back injury that I had when I was younger. So I got into coaching, and the podcast just kind of came along from there. But when it comes to the Swans, I was doing research, getting ready to play football, and I kept seeing two highlights: the Nick Davis 4 goals against Geelong in the
Nick Davis.
Yep. In the elimination final at the SCG, which still to this day, the roar of the crowd is still one of my favorite parts. And then the Leo Barry mark in the grand final.
Barry, you star. Yes.
Yep. Leo Barry, you star are two of my favorites. 2009, I saw the grand final between Geelong and St Kilda. And then saw the Drawed grand final, which I still have a fun story on that, and how the Australian had to tell the entire team that they're going to come back next week and play another game. And it just, mind blown emoji. We had no idea what was going on. In 2012, I watched the Sydney Swans Hawthorn grand final, and I fell in love with the Swan style. I fell in love with the hard tackling, gritty, get after it, the blue collar thing that a lot of the sports teams that I love up here have. So I fell in love with the Swans, started keeping track of them. And then in 2016, I made the jump. I took the plunge and I became an international member and have been an international member ever since. And like I said, since 2017, have not missed a game live of the men's or the women's. Only one that I missed live. I watched it on tape delay. So
we'll let that one slide, man. I think you've done enough.
Unfortunately, I paid for it too. It was the Swans women's game against Hawthorn, and Hawthorn came back and won that game. That was not a fun weekend because that happened, and then unfortunately, the demolishing of Geelong over Sydney, not even 2 days later, was not any more fun.
Really quick question: who's your favorite Swan of all time?
Oh, it has to be Goodsy. You cannot go past him. He was absolutely
good.
incredible.
He was
The fact that you could put him in any part of the ground and he was successful. I mean, I would have to say like, my present day one is another one, and he's a little bit controversial for some. And that's Dane Rampy. Absolutely love Ramps. The fact that he climbed the post climb against Essendon a few years ago was one of those that I kind of went, "Oh, Dane, what are you doing?" But if you know him, that like it didn't really come out of nowhere. Like it didn't shock me that he would do something like that.
So on your list of favorite players, where does Luke Parker rank in that list?
Oh man, he's so hard not to love. He's probably a top 5 guy for me. A top 5 guy for me. Like I loved Buddy. I loved Buddy when he played. Like he was one of my favorite players, especially early. And then I saw all the Goodsy stuff and went through that. But Parks is a top fiver for me. The fact that he's been with the club. In fact, he's the last remaining member of that 2012 grand final. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard not having him in the red and white. But I think he's going to a place. I think he's going to be successful, and I'm happy for him. Like I said, as much as it hurts, I'm happy that he's going somewhere where I think he's going to get good playing time, and I think he'll be impactful for your young midfield at North.
So what are some attributes that he's got? If you were going to nail it down to just a few things you think he can bring to North Melbourne, what do you think, say, 3 attributes he's got would be?
Oh, so it's never easy to come down with these because he's such a unique player. But consistency, he's one of those, you know exactly what you're going to get. He isn't a fluctuating player. He's one of those, if he's in the midfield, he's going to get the footy any way he can. He's going to tackle. He's going to put pressure on you. He's going to do everything he can to get the footy back. Or if he gets it back, find any way to start getting it forward. Toughness. I think he's one of those. He gets through a lot of things. I mean, the guy probably, if he could have casted and played in the AFL this year with a broken arm, he probably would have. That's how crazy that guy is. Absolutely love that about him, and just a willingness. Like he's one of those that he got kind of subjugated to a forward line role this year, just because when you look at it, how can you put him in when you had Heaney, you had Goulden, you had Warner, you had Rowbottom, you had a lot of midfield depth this year, and that's where I felt a little bit hard. I felt he was a little hard done by because he breaks his arm during the preseason, so and it kind of propelled Isaac Heaney to what he ended up being this year. So in some situations, as much as I hate losing Luke, what happened to him is kind of the reasons why we had Isaac Heaney this year.
Took that step, yeah.
Just like I said, consistency, toughness, and just you know what you're going to get from him. And I absolutely adore Luke Parker. And I think, like I said, I think he's going to a place he's going to be successful. And I think he brings in maturity and experience that I think your young midfield will definitely benefit from.
Yeah, I mean, let's go into the maybe experience and maturity thing. Off the field, we hear a lot about Bloods culture, and we've got our shin boner spirit and all that sort of stuff. And other people can laugh, but we know what it is deep down, and it means something to us and the club and the culture of the place. Bloods culture, I feel, obviously is your version of that. What is that exactly? What is it to you, and what does that really stand for? Because I think the exciting thing about Luke Parker coming through is that we know, and we saw in the grand final, not to bring that up and hit a nerve, but we did see what he was able to do, still trying to put that team on his back and trying to will them to do something. And we're excited for that as a fan base. But off the field, what does the Bloods culture sort of mean, and what of that do you think he can bring to our young team?
I know I've heard some people say this, and I do kind of believe it. I think the Swans really are good at the no dickhead policy. Like honestly, off the field, very few of the Swans get into trouble. Many of them are good, upstanding people. I know his wife. The other thing for Luke is that his wife does construction. His wife is like a house flipper, so he
Okay.
helps her with that. So there's a lot of things that he does off the field. He's just he's down home. He and the one thing will be interesting is that how he handles being in Melbourne compared to Sydney, because many of the Swans players have mentioned all the time that they can walk around in Sydney and nobody knows who they are because of the fact that it's rugby league territory. Now, Luke Parker, maybe not a little bit, maybe not as much. He's probably one of the more well-known Swans, but it's the anonymity that many of the Swans players get up there. Just you're not gonna have to deal with. He's not gonna get busted on being at a club at 2 a.m. in the morning. He's not going to. You're not gonna find out that he's got some lover scandal with cheating on his wife or anything like that. He's just a good old fashioned good guy. He's gonna do what he needs to do. He's gonna come to the club, work his absolute tail off, and then he's going to go home and then he's going to help his wife with her business. He's not going to get into trouble. His nose is going to be clean. It really is kind of that he knows what he needs to do to be a footy player. Plus, I know he's towards the twilight of his career. He knows that any opportunity, if he loses his contract, this could be it. This could be the end of his career. So he's going to keep his nose clean. He's going to go out there and do anything he can to help his help his team win when he's on the field. When he's off, he's not going to be a detriment at all in society.
And what is blood culture to you then? What does that mean? What do you think it represents?
Just doing that little bit extra. It's that extra 1%. He's one of those that you love it because it's like if you need to lay the tackle to get a holding the ball to get the footy to go back inside 50, Luke's going to do it. If you need to do the extra little if you need to do the smother to keep it because you can't make the tackle, Luke's going to do it. If he needs to do that shepherd to keep his teammate clean so then he can look down the field and make a correct pass to move the ball at the field, Luke's going to do it. Anything those little things that may not always go onto the stat sheet, he's going to do it. Those extra efforts, those pushing to try to put tackle pressure any way he can. It's that type of stuff. It's that knowing that each and every person, the guy next to you is going to do the same thing for you. And if they do it, then you should do it. If you do it, then the next person does it. And it becomes an entire group thing. And I agree with you. I think the shin boner spirit and the Bloods culture, I think, are very, very similar. I'm one of those looking from the outside. I think the shin boner spirit is really pretty much the same, just in a different mantra. And I think because the Swans have won, that's why it's talked about so much, because unfortunately North has had some of its issues. I think that's why the shin boner spirit hasn't picked up or being talked in the reverence that the Swans Bloods culture has been talked about.
Yeah, I'd agree with that completely. I think, like you said, they're very sort of similar things with Bloods culture and shin boner spirit. And, we need someone who can come in and represent that as a club for us, and as a fan base, we look for someone who shows that sort of stuff on the field. Zeeble is a great example, and Cunnington of that sort of stuff. And he sort of comes in and, maybe like Zeeble in more of his prime, playing that midfield forward sort of role. I really see him filling that, but from a toughness and then doing the 1%ers, I fully see him, taking that and really running with it to sort of instill that. Clarkson knows what shin boner spirit means. He played for the club back in the day. Parker is a standard setter coming from your culture, which was fantastic, to ours, which Clarkson has rebuilt, and I do believe is strong internally, even though the external wouldn't suggest that to be true. But it's also, we got a guy like Liam Shields a couple of years ago, which was great, and an on-field coach and a leader, but he's not going to be able to make, or he wasn't able to make much of an impact on the field like I think Parker will. And that's why I think this is just an A+ signing all across the board for us. Parker's 31. How much time do you reckon he's got left in him? I'm a big believer of 30 is not when you decline. I think, and a player like Parker, I can see playing until 34, 35 years old. The Jack Darling situation is the same, where I don't think 32 is past it at all. I think if it was the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, absolutely, but not how things are these days. How was his form when he did play this year, and how long do you see him being at a decently high level?
I think it really is going to depend on how many games and how much rest you can get into him. Because I think when it comes to it, again, this year, as many people in the AFL saw, I mean, just how did you get into would anybody get into this Sydney midfield with the youngsters, with their energy and their pressure, and the fact that they were hitting the scoreboard? I mean, Errol Goulden, Isaac Heaney, Chad Warner. I mean, three of like the top 10 goal kicking midfielders in the entire competition. So I think Parker's got time. I think the biggest thing is that he did kind of burn the candle on both ends a little. That's my only worry is he's 31, but I'd almost add 2 years because, again, the way he plays, he was always this little tough nut that got in and got underneath him and Josh Kennedy. I mean, we're kind of the same way. That my worry is there's a few more miles on his tires than most 31-year-old players. Okay. So I would give him at least 3 years, just because I think he'll step in and, as you kind of said, play that midfield forward role. The biggest thing will be is that how does the progression of your youngsters affect that? You have your Wardlaws, you have your Davies Uniacke, you have your Sheezels. Well, how does that go? Because if they start to progress and take over the midfield time, I think it lowers Parker's chances of going longer. It just depends. If Parker is necessary to go through the midfield and be, like I said, that get under almost the I'm trying to think of the doggies crazy tattoo guy right off the top. I'm losing him. Yep, Libba. Like, I think Parker could be your Libba. And then Davies Uniacke can be your Bontempelli, where he's on the outside and he's the distributor, he's the goal kicker. Parker becomes the Libba because he goes and gets the footy, gets it out to your little bit speedier, a little bit younger players. And like I said, it just depends. If they can get rest to him, 3 seasons, 4 seasons. If they have to play him 18, 19 games more, like a lot, then I worry that it's going to add up on him and it's going to be a little bit quicker. At least 3. I think at least 3. He's got the game style that he can play that pocket forward, and he's deadly around goal. So he can do that. The issue I saw like this year with the grand final is if he's not the fastest guy in the world. And I think Harris Andrews, he tagged him a little bit, kind of took him out of the game at times, but Harris Andrews was still able. He had a little bit more pace to be able to get away from him. So that all just kind of depends on how that goes. So.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. I think I see Parker playing predominantly like a half forward role. Like, as an example from last year, I'm not sure if you're aware, but like, did you watch the Collingwood and North Melbourne game or hear about that game where we were ahead by 50 points or so, and then they came back? The perfect role I see for Parker is
the ending that everybody talks about.
I know I was there, man.
I wasn't trying to throw that at the shot. I brought up
the grand final before, mate. So yeah, well, look, we're both taking shots here. Unbelievable. No, I see him playing like a predominantly half-forward role, and Sheezel more going into that midfield. I think Wardlaw, Sheezel, Davies Uniacke is the midfield 3, and I think Parker is the 4th man up to predominantly play forward. And if we're humming, I think we keep him down there to rest his body. But if we need a big clearance, we need some toughness in there, and things are going against us, I think he's the guy to go in there. So hopefully, I mean, we don't get many leads and keep many leads anymore. But if we are better next year and we are up in a game, I don't think we're going to see him crashing and bashing in the midfield as much, where we would rest him forward pocket, half forward. But then when we do need him to step up for those, 10, 15 games and moments that we really need a hard nut and an experienced guy in there, I think he is that guy.
Yeah, he did that a couple of times. I know there's a couple of games where we tossed him into the mid. I think Collingwood was one of them when we played him at the SCG. We threw him into the midfield. We're down 20, and I think it was like 2 or 3 consecutive center bounces, and both of them he came out with the footy and was inside 50 in less than 10 seconds. So he can do that for you. So I think if that's how you utilize him, I think he's going to fit perfectly at North Melbourne.
So I'm not sure how much you've been keeping up with North's rebuild at all, but where we've been in a pretty bad spot the last few years, even though I feel when Clarkson came in, even though the results haven't exactly picked up, structure off the field and everything is getting a lot better. Do you see North Melbourne improving with the additions of Parker and Darling?
Yeah, I honestly, they add a couple of experienced pieces to a group that is very young, very raw. But I've liked the tenacity. I just think, unfortunately, that they've been kind of the proverbial kicking. They've been kind of the proverbial kicking thing,
Yeah.
of the entire competition, and not just because of score wise. I just think they've almost become this laugh away joke. Like, oh, you're just playing North, it's fine. And I'm like, as we've seen over the last couple of years, like if a team takes them lightly, they find that it's much more of a headache. And the first season, I kept saying, like, they're losing games, but they're competitive in it. They're fighting into it. Have you had issues of games that have gotten away? Absolutely. But it is one of those where it's like, you can see there's improvement. You can see that there's change amongst the group. It's just, can Clarko get the whole thing? And I think you add a couple of experienced veterans they come from cultures that have both won a premiership. Sydney's won a premiership 2012. West Coast Eagles, Jack Darling was part of a team in 2018. So you're bringing in premiership experienced players. I think it's only a good thing. You're getting another year into Wardlaw. You're getting another year into Sheasel. You're getting another year into Luke Davies-Uniacke. And the fact that LDU decides to re-sign is even better, because it shows he's seeing the improvement. I mean, he could have buggered off to St. Kilda, who was throwing money at him like they're an ATM. So to see him stay loyal to the club is fantastic. The building blocks are there. The question will be is with these additions, and who knows what you get in the draft, where they're going to go. That I know that off mic we joked about the Logan McDonald thing. I didn't do it as a shot. I was just rather interested in a Norse person's opinion on. Do you almost feel like one got away? And again, hindsight's 2020. We see what he's doing with Sydney. What would have happened if they would have taken him? How would that have played out? Like I said, so hindsight's 2020. It's very easy to go, well, you missed this. We just don't know. Maybe they saw something. Maybe they saw something in Tom Powell that they didn't see in Logan McDonald. I don't know, but I think you're on the right track. I've enjoyed watching North games, covering the AFL, because I thought there's a scrappiness to them that when they're on, they can be quite the scrappy bunch. I mean, like I said, Collingwood, if it weren't for a dubious a dubious call, which I know that there's a few people that kind of gave Collingwood some stick after they complained about something happening later
running
on.
Over the mark, yeah.
They're running over the mark, yeah. So we'll keep our Collingwood shots to a minimum, but I can't help but think that karma has a two-way street. So
yes, no, it was Will Phillips in that draft as well.
Will Phillips,
Tom yeah, Will Phillips.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. And yeah, look, LDU has given us so many indications that I think LDU has that Ben Cunnington type of mentality, where I think he's very loyal to the club, and he did indicate a lot on Channel 7 here that he does want to re-sign, but it hasn't been done quite yet. So I really hope he re-signs before it starts to get to that last month or two of the season and of next season, and puts the doubt out of our minds. If he did it in the preseason, now Luke Davies-Uniacke, if you're listening, please sign that paper now. Clarko needs to hand him the checkbook, and you go, LDU, write the number down, mate, and I'm going to file that right now, because we absolutely need to keep you. But you're right, like it's another. If I was LDU, who's we'd assume has a massive contract on offer here. You got Sheasel, you've got Wardlaw, all these future pieces. That's the midfield you're building, and you're going to be in your prime with these guys. Getting a Luke Parker to teach you and lead you and fight for you and with you. Getting a Darling who's going to crash and bash and set some standards. I can only imagine that is going to go such a long way to helping these guys sign, re-sign. And are we building our premiership core here? I really hope so. Look, premiership for me is not really something I'm even thinking about. And I think that's crazy that with the position we've been in to even be saying. But, they released a graphic today or yesterday, I think it was, that I saw it today, yesterday. I don't know when it was released, but the average age or the most common age in your top 10 of the best and fairest. And North Melbourne's was 22 years old and the next best was 24. And I think that just shows how young we are and how much of a potential future we've got. Let's flip it a tiny bit here because we've talked about a lot of North. Let's talk about just the Swans in general. Parker going, do you see that there's a replacement that comes in? Is Parker going because of, someone who needs to step up into his role, or do you think Parker's just looking for a bit of a sea change?
It's kind of a combination. I think Luke's seeing the writing on the wall that his impact on the game is going to be diminishing as the years goes on, because we do have Angus Sheldrick, we have Caden Cleary, we have a couple of youngsters that honestly their future role is through the center. That's just the way it is. Angus Sheldrick had some times a couple of years ago when we had some injury issues and played quite well. Caden Cleary played some forward pocket this year, made some impact, but I think his ultimate landing spot will be through the center midfield. And like I said, the biggest question will be through this trade period is that there's all this talk of, is Chad Warner going to go back to West, or is he going to resign? This next year is going to be interesting in Swans land about that talk. But honestly, I think Luke Parker sees what happened with Taylor Adams, and I think he knows that he's next on the chop. He's next on that block because of his experience. Again, I'm not going to say age because I'm older than most of these players. So me saying a player is old is awkward for me. So I just think he's got a lot of miles on the tires. And I think if you look at the depth of the midfield this year, like I said earlier, Goulden, Heaney, Warner, McInerney, there's so many young midfielders on the Swans. I think he saw the writing on the wall that if he thought this year was hard enough being out, not only with a broken arm, but then coming back and then having to play 3 or 4 in the VFL before the unfortunate incident at Frankston, I think he's starting to see that it's going to be very difficult to get into the midfield of this Swans team. And I'm not sure if that forward was what he was looking at. So I think he was looking for greener pastures when it came to that particular situation. I don't think the depth of North is as much as what Sydney has built.
No, of course.
But I think it's coming though. I really do think it's coming. But I think he's trying to get 2 to 3 more years out of his body in a place where he thinks he can get a little bit more midfield time. I think he's reserved to the fact that forward is going to be the majority of where he plays. Where it's Sydney, I mean, you're having to deal with, like I said, the three forwards of Armadi, Logan McDonald, McLean, and then you've got Papley, and then there's really 2 other spots that are open at this present point, unless John Longmire decides to make some changes. Again, another grand final slacking. I know Sydney has become the proverbial whipping boy, which I found it interesting how many Essendon fans were like, look at Sydney. And my favorite Sydney responses were, hey, look at where you weren't.
The more Essendon slander on this podcast, the better, mate. The fans will love that as our traditional rival. So please keep that going.
Well, it's just safe to say a few of my Swans mates made sure to remind them that they haven't seen the finals since Arion Titmus was born. So it's kind of hilarious to me that I thought it was pretty funny that took a few shots at it. So it's fun. Was it frustrating to lose another grand final in the manner that we did? Absolutely. But I think it's a lot like Geelong in 2022. I just think we ran into the buzzsaw that is Brisbane or Geelong in 2022. And they just one bad quarter, just like against Geelong, one bad quarter ends the game. It literally was it. And it wasn't for lack of trying. It was just one of those where every ball bounce that could bounce Brisbane's way did. Every 50-50 call went Brisbane's way. Every mistake that Sydney could make when it comes to kicking or moving the footy happened. And I think I'm optimistic. I very, very rarely am pessimistic about things. Does it hurt? Absolutely. It stinks. This is the 3rd consecutive grand final that they've not shown up for. Is there reason to question Horst Longmire? Absolutely. But I don't think this one, like the 2022 one, is on the coaching staff. This is purely on the players. Like I'm a realist, at least in that way.
they showed that they could do it all year. I mean, I really like the Swans, by the way. I wanted them to win the grand final. I've been a big admirer of what they've been able to build there. I know that there's academy questions with how many talents they're churning out, and is that fair and not? But at the end of the day, they've got the academy.
Can I address that really quickly?
Yeah, go.
Because my favorite part about it, and I understand being a Victorian-based one is like, I've heard that all the time. Everybody's like, they have such an advantage. I go, my favorite question that I like to ask them is like, how many kids have went through the Swans Academy? Most Victorians do not know that.
Yeah.
There have been over 2,600 Swans Academy players. You want to know how many have played AFL?
Tell me.
12.
Interesting.
You want to know how many are on the Swans list currently? 6.
Yeah, okay, interesting.
So tell me, what advantage okay, I get it, okay. Isaac Heaney, Callum Mills, Brendan Campbell, Errol Goulden, there's 2 others, Caden Cleary and Indy Kirk are the 6 Swans Academy players. Or no, Will Edwards, not Indy. Indy wasn't with the Academy. Will Edwards. So 2 of them weren't even on the team for most of the year. Cal Mills pretty much wasn't on. So this year there were really only 3, and Braden Campbell was on and off. So again, I when I talk with people about the academy, I get what you're saying because you see Isaac Heaney and you see Errol Goulden. But my favorite response is that, did you know North actually probably had a chance to pick up Errol Goulden? They just didn't, because Errol Goulden was the 31st draft, was the 30th or 32nd pick of that particular draft, because most teams in Victoria didn't want to draft him because he was too small.
It's an interesting one though, because I think that, and I don't disagree with academy per se. I think it's like I have and I've talked about this so much on the podcast, so it will bore people, but my opinion on father-son is that if you're pro academy or pro, if you're against academy or you're against compensation and all that sort of stuff in the AFL, then you can't be for father-son and all that sort of stuff. I
100% agree with that. 100%. I've said that numerous times. If you're like father-son but hate the academy, you literally contradict yourself as you're saying that. Now, again, are all father-sons going to be the Nick and Josh Dacos? Absolutely not. There's the road is littered with father-sons.
Except the last 5 years when North's been at the bottom of the ladder. We've had an incredible run of father-son and academy sort of players going high. I guess it is another thing in that where like the Swans are able to, still recruit that player or sort of match or bid on that player from the academy, regardless if you did get drafted. But look, not taking a dig at the academy, I think it's just one extra layer, and the numbers you brought are really interesting. But it's another layer on top of the same recruiting sort of strategy or the same elements that every team has. And it's just that one extra layer which has produced, and even if you get 1 or 2 guns in a generation, which it looks like you've got, that's a generation of grand finals and premierships. I think that's where it's interesting, because there's big debates about like interstate teams compared to Victorian teams. And I don't believe that I don't have the numbers, but it's a gut feel that I don't know if I believe that in this day and age, AFL is so small in Sydney, around Sydney and Brisbane, that there needs to be strategic academies to get the players in, compared to dividing it across Victoria with 8 different teams. And I think that is the sort of thing to me where I'm like, I feel like every team should have the academy, or no team should. Yeah, go.
I totally get it. But there's one issue you always forget. Does NRL have a draft? No. What can NRL teams do that none of the Victorian teams and none of the Sydney teams, none of the Brisbane teams can do? And that's sign players at 17 years old to a contract of 4 years, which is the other issue this is the reason why I understand why the academies are being fought for so much. Sydney has lost 3 players to the NRL because Sydney-based NRL teams can sign kids at 17 years old to professional contracts. The Melbourne Storm aren't going to take anybody from any of the NAB league, or the Coates League, or whatever they keep changing it to. They don't do that. Sydney-based teams have signed some of the best academy prospects that Sydney and Brisbane have had. The Brisbane Broncos have done it to Brisbane as well. That's the other issue that Sydney-based teams have, that Victorian teams, South Australian teams, and WA teams, they don't get their players poached from another code. So it's another little layer that I think some in Victoria don't talk about, is that Sydney have lost. I think they had a 17-year-old that was in the academy for 3 or 4 years, was looking like a really, really good prospect. And I can't remember if it was Newcastle or one of the NRL league teams just signed him when he just signed him not even 6 months ago.
What do you think about like interstate advantage of, playing at home compared to travel? Because this also gets thrown out a lot in Victoria here, and I talked about it with Jesse from True Footy as well. Of a lot of interstate clubs complain about the travel, but then they do get to play in front of their home fans and their own stadium every second week, compared to us, where we play away games at our home stadium against teams that play home games at the MCG. And our home is Marvel, but it's not really a home for anybody. It's just kind of a stadium we play games in. And I think the advantage of playing in Perth or Sydney, as you've seen with the Swans, mate, you're unbeatable at that ground. And, then you could also counter that by saying then playing at the MCG for the grand final might have been a reason why it didn't go as well. Or if you played it on the G, you probably absolutely destroy Brisbane. I don't know where I stand on all of this, but I really think that and we could also put this compared to advantage and disadvantage of academy compared to what we were talking about before. I feel like there's so many little intricacies with all of this, and father-son and compensation picks and everything, that it basically evens itself out enough to be okay until the best player in the draft goes to the team that just won the premiership. And then we talk about the run we've had the last 5 years of the father-son.
100%. Like I find it very interesting. Like my thing is this: I think the advantages even out, but then again, like I said, it depends on what you consider advantage. For me personally, I think the Victorian teams have more of an advantage, because when you're playing 15 of your 24 games within a 40-kilometer radius, there's less wear and tear on the body. I mean, I would love to ask David Mundy from Fremantle, I mean, dude, how's your body? Like, because of the fact that if there's teams that are disadvantaged the most, and this is where I do get it, I think WA is probably the most disadvantaged, because not only are they an interstate team and they have the farthest travel every year, because they're coming from Perth over to the East Coast or to South Australia every second week. I mean, I think somebody put it in. David Mundy nearly put in a million miles over his entire career because of the flights from Perth over to the East. And they don't have an academy system. And WA at this present point right now is having the issue is they're not producing the amount of talent. And then the issue you run into for the WA boys is the same thing, is the go home factor. And I keep seeing it all the time that's the difference. So, like, I will concede that the academies do give an advantage in other ways. And I agree with you that I think the disadvantages in different A's actually evens out. I think if there's one team or two teams that I think need a little bit of help and I think should get some evening out qualities, and that's the Perth teams, because SA now has the gather round, so they get technically a quote unquote home game during that particular round. So that's an extra week that they don't have to travel outside of SA. So I 100% agree with you. I've said numerous times, like, my favorite part is when people talk about the fixture. I said, well, the fixture is compromised in and of itself just because of the fact that you've got 10 teams in the state of Victoria. Yeah, it's never going to be even. It's never. It is literally impossible because of the number of teams. It is literally impossible for them to have an even fixture. So that's why when I hear Victorians whine about, like with Gold Coast last year in the 4 draft picks, I asked a few Victorians. I said, well, how many times has Gold Coast made the finals? And it's funny how many get their undies in a ruffle over that, because it stops their argument, because they're like, well, this is a travesty. They're getting the. I said, yeah, but have they made the finals?
But does that mean you keep
And they
pumping
just
picks into them though to keep them being mediocre? Like, you know,
Well,
I
but
know
if-
how
but if
much
you- but if you
criticism
think
as a
of-
club. So really quickly, I know how much like criticism as a
Oh,
club
you're
North
good.
Melbourne got for getting our compensation package or our assistance package, which was a first round pick, then didn't end up getting picked until late second round because of all the academies and the father sons above it. So
Yep,
everyone
I
knows
get it.
us to have got a first round pick, and that's what was advertised, saying we've got handouts. You know, we're getting supported by the AFL, but in reality, that pick wasn't picked until about pick 31 or something like that. So that's something to sort of think about as well. And then to caveat sort of what you were saying with like the Perth teams as well. Yes, I agree their travel is crazy compared to the others, but then look at a North where we've got to also play I know we choose to do it, play 4 games away from Victoria, which take 4 home games away from us, which is down in Tassie, and then having to play the Gold Coast in Darwin every single year, and that game against Brisbane in Adelaide every single year. So realistically, we only get home games in Melbourne, maybe 8 or 9 home games in Melbourne max a year. And then, you know, you've got teams like Gold Coast getting the picks and getting their home ground, and the AFL funding half a Dimmer's contract and all that sort of stuff. And they're still not getting there. And they've had 10 or 12 years of trying to do this compared to us, where I feel like we get ridiculed a lot more, but we barely play any home games in Victoria, it feels like. And then we do get a little bit of help when we've missed out on a Dacos and Ashcroft, a Hugo Hagan, a Jed Walter, Sam Dustin, all these other guys. But we don't seem to get much advantage. And I think being the smallest club in Victoria has its limitations, especially even with attracting players, because how many players born in other states are going to want to go home? So, you know, look, there's so many ways we can throw this around, and I guess this isn't necessarily a chat about this, but still.
No. Completely get it. And I think more of my gripe is when you see Collingwood, Carlton, and Essendon fans whine pissed.
Oh, Collingwood have never played a home game or
complain.
played a game down in Tasmania before. I think never.
I know. Well, it's the same thing. How many of them actually play down at Cardinia Park?
Yeah, never.
It's never. like I've had so many discussions back and forth with some people. I'm like honestly, in my personal opinion, if Geelong's got their own ground, let them play their games down there. I get the AFL want to do this and want to do that, but they've got their own stadium. Let them have it. They've literally done everything that they've asked, and they still have to play games in the MCG and somebody else's ground. Like, I get that. So, like I guess my complaint more of it's the giant clubs that get the 15 games at the MCG that I have a problem with in Victoria. Mine is not towards St Kilda or North Melbourne. Like I said, for me, it's one of those. This is the first time. This is the first year with Brisbane winning the grand final, with Brisbane or Sydney, no matter who won. This is the first time an academy and a team within academy has won a premiership. This is the first time, because the Premiership 3 that Brisbane won was before academies were established. The 2012 grand final that Sydney won was the year their academy started. So no academy player from any of the Northern academies has ever won a premiership until this season was the first year it was possible for a Brisbane Academy player to win a premiership. So that's my argument when it comes to the academies is that it is, I get it, some teams are winning, but for me, when you're going to say you have an advantage, that means you should be winning the premiership. And if you're not winning the premiership, what advantage are you really getting? That's personal. I get all your arguments. In fact, I respect all your arguments because of that. With Tassie coming in, though, how will that change that dynamic? Because I don't think you're going to be playing as many games down in Tassie when the Devils come in. Then I think you're going to get a few more. So I think that particular part of your argument will, I think, even out. And
100%.
I think when it comes to it, if you start building a core, you've got Clarko there, you could become a destination club because we'll still have some finances that other teams don't have right now because they have even bigger stars. I know LDU's probably going to get his payday very soon, and it's going to make him quite the
very rich man,
the handsome man when it comes to it. But I still think there's some growing blocks for you at North. And like I said, I think you've got the correct things for it. I will have this discussion. What irks me off is when I get called names. I'm like, no, I will have a discussion with you. I will hear your side. I will give you my side. I will hear your side. But as soon as being called names, I said, that's not an argument. That's not. I want an intelligent argument. Give me some. I will take it in and be more than willing to listen to it, because I've had this academy discussion with people all the time, and I can see exactly how people say that it's this huge advantage.
Well, look, all I know, mate, is Nick Blakey plays for you and not us, and that pisses me off. So that's
father-son. That was a father-son one. That was a father-son academy. That was a crazy one. You also got to remember too, at the time that he made the decision, his dad was actually coaching with Sydney at the time. So I get that one made sense.
I was just trying to trigger you.
No, you're not triggering me. I totally get that.
Yeah.
Nick Blakey. If you had Nick Blakey when you got Sheasel, that would have been a scary. That was been a scary.
Not a bad combination.
For sure.
Oh dear.
So.
Well, look, we better wrap it up there. That's enough bickering and going back and forward. But thank you for your time.
I thought it was a healthy discussion.
No, it was very respectful, and we respect each other's opinions, and we've come to a healthy plateau right at the end with a bit of Nick Blakey banter thrown out there. Just before we go, give us a couple of sentences to the North Melbourne fans listening to this, why Luke Parker is good. Just tell us how great he is and give us hope for the future.
He is shin boner spirit for sure. He comes in wanting to do the best for the club. He'll step in. He's a club man through and through. Like I said, you're not going to see him getting busted at night at a club. He's a good family man. I think he's going to step in and be a proud shin boner, and trust me, there will be many a Swans fan that will be barracking for him to do well at North Melbourne and help your club progress even further.
Unbelievable. Well, thank you very much, mate, for jumping on. I appreciate you getting up in the hours of the morning for yourself. Go the Swans. Hopefully they're back there next year and you retool and you're back in a granny and you can hold the cup up. Unless we're there, and like 1996, I hope we absolutely smash you for in the granny against you. But other than that, I'm not holding on to old things. I was 1 year old when that happened. But look, they'll be back there, mate, and maybe another Swans North grand final sometime soon.
All the best in North. Like I said, they're one of those teams I keep track of. Like I said, Marnie, a dear friend, so I always keep an eye on the North games, and I know when they win, I always send her a message, seeing how happy she is. So this has been fantastic. Like I said, I love the individual club podcast. They're fun to listen to as somebody that covers everything. They're fun. I love what you're doing. It's fantastic. Like I said, you have a ripper and Marnie there. So all the best to North this year. I know your women's team is looking absolutely scintillating. Hopefully they can get up one more step this year and win a grand final. They've been looking absolutely fantastic this season. So go the Roos. It's been fantastic. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.